At our annual spring party, I carried my drunk wife to bed. Then she whispered, "Leave me alone, Clark. My husband might catch us." My name's not Clark. That's the night I stopped being a husband and became something else. Our backyard had always been a place of joy. Friday BBQs, birthday balloons, lazy Sunday mornings. So when I heard the faint thump of bass still pulsing from the Bluetooth speaker and the laughter fading from the driveway, I figured everything was fine. Our annual spring party had finally wound down. Guests staggered out with red plastic cups and half-eaten desserts. I'd hosted this event 5 years straight, and this one felt no different, until it did. Jenna, my wife, was missing. I chalked it up to one too many glasses of wine. She'd been distracted all evening, flitting between conversations like she was waiting for someone. Still, I smiled, played the good host, and cleaned up plates without asking questions. But inside, something felt off. Had been for a while. She wasn't cruel, not directly, but lately her affection had a timer. Her glances came half a second too late. Her laughter didn't quite reach her eyes. I'd blamed it on work stress. I always did. I searched the kitchen, the living room, even the garage. Then I went upstairs. She was in the guest room, half sprawled across the bed. One shoe dangling, makeup smudged, dress bunched awkwardly. I stepped closer. She reeked of wine and a cologne I didn't wear. Her phone buzzed near the edge of the bed. I picked it up without thinking. The screen flashed a message from someone named C. She hadn't set a passcode. Odd, considering she always had. I placed the phone on the dresser. "Hey," I whispered, leaning over. "Let's get you comfortable." She stirred, barely conscious, and slurred. Clark, leave me alone. My husband might catch us, and the guests are still outside." "Clark." I froze. She didn't open her eyes again. Just went limp. I stood there for a long time. Not angry. Not crying. Just still. "Clark." That was the name, she said. Not mine. And that single moment, those careless, drunken words, split my life into a before and after. I walked out of the room and shut the door. I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room as the silence of an empty house pressed against me. The fridge hummed in the kitchen. The wall clock ticked like it was counting down to something. I didn't move. I didn't plan revenge. Not yet. I just listened to the sound of her sleeping upstairs, unaware of the line she'd crossed. "Clark." She said it like it was routine, like they had done this before. There was no hesitation, no dream logic. That was instinct, what someone says when their guard's down, when they think no one's listening. She believed she was safe, but she wasn't. The next morning, Jenna stumbled into the kitchen, rubbing her temples. "Ugh, what time is it?" she groaned. "Did I pass out early?" I smiled. "You had a few too many. I carried you upstairs." She laughed softly, kissed my cheek, and went to the bathroom. That kiss landed like a slap. She didn't even flinch. No guilt, no awkward pause. Just another day in the life of a woman who thought she had me fooled. But I wasn't playing husband anymore. I was done guessing. It was time to know. That night I waited until she was asleep, then unlocked her phone again. The code was her birthday. Classic. I searched messages, emails, photo apps. Nothing obvious. Just a few harmless texts to co-workers, friends, her sister. But something felt staged, too clean. I started digging deeper. WhatsApp had a hidden archive. I found it. That's where Clark lived. The messages were careful, no photos, just time-stamped coordinates and inside jokes only lovers would understand. "Same room? You smell like trouble. Can't stop thinking about last Friday." There were more. I traced deleted emails through her account's recovery logs. I found receipts for hotel stays, rideshare drop-offs, transfers from our joint account to a consultant she'd never mentioned. And then I found a photo album hidden in her Google Drive labeled Event Resources. Inside were selfies with Clark, his arm around her waist in a dim hotel room, both of them grinning like teenagers. She hadn't just cheated. She'd created a whole world where I didn't exist. That was the moment I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I've worked in data compliance for years. Jenna never paid attention to what I did. She had no idea how much of her digital life could be reconstructed with the right tools and enough patience. So I got to work. By the end of the week, I had a file, screenshots, logs, transfers, images, voice notes, even a few voicemails she thought were deleted. I labeled it her truth, and then I sent a message, not to Jenna, to Maria, Clark's wife. It was anonymous at first, just enough to spark suspicion, but when she replied 2 days later, it was clear she already knew something was wrong. I gave her everything, every timestamp, every image. Her reply was short. You're not the only one preparing an exit. Let's make sure they don't write the ending. Maria and I didn't meet in a dramatic confrontation. There was no shouting, no tears, just two people who had been lied to, choosing clarity over chaos. Our first conversation happened over coffee in a public park. Neutral ground. She brought a notebook. I brought the file. She flipped through it in silence. Photos, receipts, messages, voice notes. Occasionally she nodded or muttered, "Unbelievable." When she was done, she closed the folder and looked at me with sharp, calm eyes. "Clark's been cheating on me for months," she said. "But this confirms everything." We didn't talk much about emotions. We talked strategy. Maria was methodical, organized. She worked in HR, ironically, knew exactly how complaints moved through corporate channels. We shared a common goal, destroy the fantasy they'd built, but legally, surgically. No drama, no blow-ups, just clean, final consequences. We began planning. Back home, Jenna sensed nothing. She moved through our days as if nothing had changed. She smiled when I poured her coffee, texted Clark while sitting 10 feet from me, claimed she had late client meetings, and came home smelling faintly of someone else's cologne. I let her lie. I let her believe she was in control. But every moment she relaxed, I was building the next step. The groundwork had to be perfect. No loopholes, no chance for her to twist the narrative. I updated the dossier weekly, added synced call logs, screenshots of new messages, rideshare confirmations, even access logs from the hotel's Wi-Fi tied to her email. One night she slipped up. She left her tablet open, and I saw a message preview from Clark. "Same room next Friday?" I took a screenshot. Time, date, room number. Then I cleared the notification. She never noticed. Step 2 began with legal prep. I met with a lawyer, explained the situation. We had a prenup, one Jenna had once laughed off as just a formality. That document, combined with clear proof of adultery, meant she'd walk away with nothing if she contested the divorce. I filed paperwork under adulterous misconduct. Quietly, no announcement, no confrontation, just motions and signatures behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Maria filed her own complaint through her company's HR department. She attached evidence, much of it from my files. Clark had violated multiple company policies, interoffice relationships, misuse of funds, and conduct that damaged the company's reputation. We agreed not to make the final move until the right moment. We needed one last domino to fall. 2 weeks later, I sat Jenna down at the kitchen table. She was scrolling through her phone. I watched her fingers pause as a message popped up. She smiled, soft, amused, then glanced up at me. "What's up?" she asked. "You've seemed distant," I said. "Is there something you want to tell me?" She hesitated. It was brief, but I saw it. Her thumb hovered over her screen before she locked the phone. "Work's been intense," she said. "The Simmons account's a nightmare. Clark's team keeps messing up timelines." Clark's team. Not even subtle anymore. I nodded slowly. "Of course. Let me know if you need help." She smiled, warm, trusting, like she still thought I was the safest person in the room. I stood up, kissed her on the forehead, and went to bed. 3 days later, I suggested a weekend getaway. Just the two of us. Somewhere quiet, private. I told her I wanted to reconnect. She lit up. "You're really trying, huh?" she said, squeezing my hand. "Always," I replied. The lake house I picked was secluded, rented through a friend who owed me a favor. Jenna thought it was a romantic gesture. She packed a bag, picked out a bottle of wine she thought I liked, told me she was happy we were getting back to us. But she didn't know I'd already sent Clark a message. From her burner phone. I had it unlocked weeks ago. I drafted the message in her tone, her style. "Hey, he's away. One night. Just us. Come." He replied within minutes. I'll bring wine. I've missed you. I watched Jenna all weekend, studied her face as we played couple again. She laughed at my jokes, made breakfast, held my hand during the walk by the lake, but her phone buzzed 3 times Saturday afternoon. Each time she smiled to herself. She thought she was winning. She had no idea the walls were already closing in. Sunday night, I told her I needed to head out early for a client call. She nodded, barely listening, already typing. I left the cabin and walked 100 feet to the guest house. Lights off, Wi-Fi connected, laptop open, streaming the feed. The lake house had hidden microphones in the bedroom and a camera behind the living room mirror. All synced to a secure cloud folder. Audio ran on a delay, so when they stepped through the door, my voice would play, crystal clear. Clark arrived around 9 p.m. He knocked. Jenna answered, stunned. "Clark, what are you doing here?" He smiled, held up the wine. "Didn't you text me?" She looked confused, then scared. "Wait, what?" That's when my voice played over the ceiling speakers. "Hey, Clark, Jenna, welcome to the last night you get to lie without consequence." She screamed. He froze. I watched from the guest house, sipping tea. No need to interrupt. The footage was already uploading. Set to auto send at midnight. To Clark's HR, Jenna's supervisor, Maria, Jenna's sister, and every mutual friend who ever looked at me like I didn't measure up. My phone buzzed. A dozen texts from Jenna, one from Clark, all the same flavor. "We need to talk. I can explain. Please, just hear me out." I turned my phone off. By the time I returned to the city on Monday morning, the match had already hit the gasoline. Clark's company didn't wait. Maria's HR complaint, combined with the footage and timestamps I supplied, left little to debate. Within 72 hours, he was escorted out. No final meetings, no warnings. Just, "We'll be in touch about your personal items." Maria texted me 2 words that day. "It's done." At Jenna's office, the fallout wasn't instant, but the ripples had started. I hadn't sent anything to her employer directly. I didn't need to. Her supervisor got it from her own sister, who for years had warned me to keep an eye on Jenna's patterns. That footage hit harder coming from family. She couldn't spin it as revenge. She tried anyway. Text after text, voicemails, a long email begging for a conversation. "You set me up. You tricked me. This is emotional abuse." None of it worked. Her voice slurring Clark's name in our guest room, her arms around him on camera, her texts recovered and time-stamped. She had no defense. I hadn't manufactured anything. I'd simply revealed it. I blocked her. I blocked Clark too, just after sending him a digital copy of a pre-signed legal complaint. Workplace harassment, inappropriate conduct, misuse of shared resources. Maria delivered her divorce petition the same day. Evidence attached. Witnesses listed. Her lawyer was aggressive, precise. Clark wouldn't just lose his marriage, he'd likely lose his license to practice. As for Jenna, the lake house had been the tipping point, but what came next was a slow collapse. Her employer didn't fire her outright. They requested a quiet resignation. They cited external factors affecting internal trust. She was told it'd be best to step down before the story spread further. She didn't argue. The news spread quietly but fast. Our mutual friends, people who'd always considered me a background character in Jenna's social life, suddenly looked at me differently. Not with pity, but with surprise. I wasn't the guy they assumed I was. I wasn't soft. I wasn't oblivious. I had simply waited, collected facts, and moved when it mattered. One of them texted me, "You okay, man?" I replied honestly, "I'm not okay yet, but I will be." The divorce moved quickly. Jenna didn't contest. She couldn't. The prenup gave her no leverage. Everything I'd built, my business, the house, our shared car, remained mine. She walked away with barely enough to rent an apartment in a neighborhood she once mocked for being too basic. We signed papers through lawyers. No mediation room, no dramatic standoffs. The last time I saw her in person was when we signed the final documents. She didn't look up once, just sat at the table, silent, unmoving. Before I left, I slid an envelope across to her. Inside was a single screenshot, her face drunk, whispering, "Clark in our bedroom." I never saw her open it. People assume revenge is loud, shouting, smashing, confrontation. But this wasn't about rage. I never wanted to hurt her. I wanted her to see what she'd become. That moment, that screenshot, it was the origin of her collapse. The lie she told while asleep. The name that slipped out like truth. That whisper ended our marriage. Not the affair itself, not the betrayal, but the moment she forgot I was ever real. Now she had to sit with that. Clark didn't try to contact me again. From what Maria told me, he lost everything. He moved in with his brother temporarily, then into a one-bedroom sublet across town. His wife gone, his job terminated, and a pending investigation into expense abuse he thought no one would ever trace. I never needed to speak to him again. His downfall was a self-inflicted wound I simply documented. Jenna tried spinning the narrative with some friends, said I was manipulative, that I'd staged everything, that she'd been emotionally isolated and confused. But the facts were louder than her excuses. The timeline made sense. The receipts lined up. The audio was unedited. And nobody believed I'd made it all up, not after seeing how calmly and legally it had all unfolded. A few people stopped talking to me. I didn't mind. Those weren't friends worth keeping. I stayed quiet. No gloating, no revenge posts, no telling my side to anyone who didn't ask directly. Instead, I focused on closing doors, deleting old chats, archiving legal documents, and finally taking Jenna's name off everything. The mortgage, the insurance, the emergency contact forms. Bit by bit, I erased her from my reality. It wasn't bitter. It was necessary. When the divorce finalized, the silence that followed was unfamiliar. Not peaceful, just quiet. No pings from Jenna. No calendar reminders for anniversary dinners. No back and forth arguments about errands or party invites. Just space. And in that space, I had to figure out who I was without her. There was no dramatic transformation, no montage. Just slow mornings, therapy sessions, long walks, and a pile of unspoken thoughts I was finally forced to confront. For the first time in 5 years, I had time that wasn't scheduled around someone else. It was uncomfortable. At first, I replayed everything, what I could have done differently, signs I missed, whether any of it had ever been real. But those thoughts eventually faded. Not because I found answers, but because I realized the questions didn't matter anymore. The truth was, I didn't miss her. I missed the version of her I thought I knew. Jenna didn't fight for reconciliation. She never tried to show up in person, never sent letters, just one final email, weeks after the divorce was official, a long, winding apology that blamed stress, confusion, emotional neglect, everything but herself. I read it once and archived it. There was no satisfaction in her apology because it came too late and from the wrong place. Self-preservation, not remorse. She kept her distance after that. I heard bits and pieces from mutual acquaintances. She moved into a one-bedroom condo in a neighborhood she used to call a pit stop for divorcees. Took a job at a smaller firm. Tried dating again, but nothing serious. Her social media presence shrank. Carefully curated posts about brunch and books. No selfies, no tags, just noise pretending to be healing. Maria and I stayed in contact for a while. We shared information as our legal processes unfolded. Eventually, we stopped needing to. Her case closed, her divorce finalized. She moved cities for a fresh start and thanked me for not letting her feel crazy when she first suspected something was wrong. We never became close friends, but we didn't need to. We were a moment in each other's lives, people who burned down a lie and walked away when it was over. I didn't start dating again right away, not because I was scared, because I didn't want to bring anyone else into the mess I hadn't finished sorting through. I needed to rebuild without pretending to be okay. So I said no to setups, deleted dating apps, and told my friends to stop offering introductions. Instead, I focused on what I'd neglected during the marriage. Friends I hadn't called in months, hobbies I'd shelved, family visits I kept rescheduling. It wasn't some grand recovery arc, just ordinary days where I wasn't performing for anyone. Therapy helped, not because it gave me solutions, but because it gave me space to talk without censoring myself, to say things I couldn't say in front of friends, and didn't trust myself to write in a journal. I admitted that I'd been afraid of being alone, that I'd tolerated Jenna's distance because I thought it was better than emptiness, that I didn't even recognize myself in the mirror during the last 6 months of our marriage, and that I liked who I was becoming now. Eventually, someone new entered my life. It wasn't dramatic. No right place, right time cliché. She was a friend of a friend, introduced casually at a game night. We didn't hit it off instantly, but she asked smart questions, she listened, and when she laughed, it didn't feel like a performance. I told her the truth about my past, not on the first date, but early enough. I didn't want secrets. She listened, didn't interrupt. And when I finished, she looked at me and said, "She didn't destroy you. She just exposed who you were never supposed to stay." That sentence stuck with me, not because it erased the pain, but because it reframed it. One afternoon, I passed by the guest room, where it all started. I stopped, opened the door, stood there. The bed had new sheets. The room was different now, but the memory lingered. Her voice whispering another man's name, not out of hate, not even out of love, just out of habit. I shut the door and didn't think about it again. Jenna's story faded from my daily life. No more updates, no more conversations about her. The people who still followed her online had stopped bringing her up around me. I was no longer the guy whose wife cheated. I was just Daniel again, and Daniel was doing fine. I didn't need revenge to be dramatic. I didn't need her to collapse publicly or beg for forgiveness on social media. The justice had already happened. Quiet, methodical, final. She lost everything because of choices she made without hesitation. And I rebuilt everything because I chose not to let her define what came next. They say the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And that's what I felt finally when I saw Jenna again. It was at the mediation office, where we finalized the last few post-divorce logistics, title transfers, tax forms, things that couldn't be handled through attorneys alone. We were both early. I sat down across from her at a long table. She avoided eye contact. I didn't force it. The silence between us was a far cry from the one that had followed her betrayal. This silence was deliberate. Unnecessary words had already done their damage. Now we just needed to finish what was left. The mediator ran through the documents. Sign here, initial there, standard process. When it was over, I slid one final envelope across the table. No tricks, no threats. Just a printed screenshot. Her, drunk and half-conscious, whispering Clark's name in the house we shared. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. That moment had already taken everything from her. Jenna's story didn't go viral. There was no scandal in the newspapers. She wasn't publicly exposed or socially exiled. The collapse of her life was quiet, but total. She lost her job, her relationship, her reputation among people who once considered her the glue of our social circle. She moved out of state a few months later. A mutual friend mentioned it in passing. She's trying to start over somewhere else. I didn't ask where. I didn't care. What mattered was that her presence no longer lingered in my space. Not physically, not digitally, not emotionally. She'd burned down her life to chase a fantasy. I wasn't standing in the ashes. People ask if I ever regret the way I handled it. The cameras, the messages, the calculated planning. No, I don't. Because I didn't act out of anger. I didn't shout. I didn't break anything. I documented the truth, exposed it to the people it affected, and walked away when it was done. That's not revenge. That's accountability. If I had confronted her the night she said Clark's name, if I had lashed out, I'd be the villain in her story. She'd paint herself as confused, overwhelmed, caught in a bad marriage. But by saying nothing, by moving with facts instead of emotion, I gave her no escape route. She revealed herself. All I did was make sure no one missed it. After Jenna, I approached life differently. I was more cautious with people, more honest with myself. I learned to value stillness, not as loneliness, but as a space for clarity. I didn't rush into a new relationship to prove anything. I dated slowly, chose peace over excitement, asked better questions, paid closer attention to what people did, not what they said, and eventually I found someone worth rebuilding with. She didn't fix me. I'd already started that work on my own, but she met me where I was, without judgment, without expectation. And when I told her the full story, she didn't flinch. She said, "You didn't break. You decided not to carry the pieces that weren't yours." Looking back, I don't think Jenna set out to hurt me. I think she stopped seeing me as real. That's what infidelity is in the end. A failure to see someone else as a whole person. She didn't imagine me finding out. She didn't imagine the consequences. But actions echo whether we acknowledge them or not. And hers echoed through every part of her life. I kept the house. I renovated slowly, painted walls, replaced furniture, changed everything that reminded me of what used to be. Not because I was trying to erase the past, but because I wanted the space to reflect the life I was choosing now. The business grew. I hired new people, expanded our client list, even took some time off to travel, a luxury I hadn't given myself in years. There were tough days, sure, nights where the memory crept back in uninvited, but they passed, and each time, they came with less weight. Eventually, the memory stopped feeling like a wound. It became a line in a longer story,